What happens when the person you love becomes a stranger overnight, and you're that stranger? The white hospital walls felt cold against Maya's back as she leaned there, holding the discharge papers in her shaking hands. 3 months. 3 whole months she had been stuck in this place, and now they were telling her she could finally go home. But here's the thing that scared her the most. Home didn't feel like home anymore. The doctors kept using big words like traumatic brain injury and memory loss, but what they really meant was simple. The car crash had stolen pieces of her life. Not just any pieces, the important ones. 5 whole years gone like they never happened. And the worst part? Those 5 years included him. Jake stood by the window pretending to look at the parking lot below, but Maya could see his reflection in the glass. He looked tired. Really tired. Like he hadn't slept properly in months, which he probably hadn't. Every single day he had come to visit her. Every single day he brought flowers or her favorite snacks or photo albums filled with pictures of a life she couldn't remember living. "You ready to go?" he asked, turning around with that smile he always wore when he was trying not to look worried. Maya had learned to recognize that smile over the past few weeks. It was the same smile he wore when he showed her pictures of their apartment, their dog, their friends. The smile that said, "Please remember me," without actually saying it. Maya nodded, even though she wasn't ready at all. How could anyone be ready to return to a life that felt like someone else's movie? Jake picked up her small bag of belongings, mostly new. Clothes since she couldn't remember what she used to like wearing, and they walked down the long hallway together. The automatic doors opened with a soft whoosh, and Maya stepped outside for the first time in 3 months. The San Francisco air hit her face, cool and salty from the nearby ocean. For just a moment, something flickered in her mind. A feeling, maybe. Like she had stood in this exact spot before, breathing this exact air. But then it was gone, leaving her with nothing but confusion. Jake's car was parked right outside. A blue sedan that he said they had bought together last year. To Maya, it was just another stranger's car. He opened the passenger door for her, and she noticed how his hands shook just a little bit. He was nervous too. As they drove through the city streets, Jake started pointing things out like a tour guide. "There's the coffee shop where we had our first date," he said, slowing down near a small place with big windows and people sitting outside. Maya looked at it, waiting for some spark of recognition, some warm feeling of, "Oh yes, I remember." Nothing came. "And there's the bookstore where you spend way too much money," Jake continued, trying to keep his voice light and playful. A small shop with colorful books displayed in the window. Maya used to love reading, apparently. She still enjoyed books now, but she couldn't tell if that was because she always had or if it was something new. They stopped at a red light, and Jake pointed to their right. "That's the park where we got Charlie." Charlie was their dog, a golden retriever who had apparently cried for weeks after Maya's accident, waiting by the door for her to come home. At least someone remembered her, even if she couldn't remember him. "He's been staying with my sister while you were in the hospital," Jake said, reading her mind. "But he's coming home tomorrow." I thought it might be too much all at once. Maya appreciated that. Everything already felt like too much. The sounds of the city were too loud. The colors too bright. The weight of not knowing who she was supposed to be too heavy. Their apartment building looked normal enough. Red brick, 4 stories with little flower boxes under some of the windows. Jake parked and came around to help her out of the car, but Maya was already standing, looking up at the building that was supposedly her home. "3rd floor," Jake said softly. "The one with the blue curtains." They climbed the stairs slowly. Maya's legs still felt weak sometimes. Another gift from the accident. Jake unlocked the door and stepped back to let her go first, like he was giving her permission to enter her own life. The apartment was exactly like the photos Jake had shown her, but seeing it in person was different. More real and more strange at the same time. Everything looked lived in and comfortable. There were paintings on the walls, paintings she had apparently created herself. Books everywhere organized by color rather than by author. Plants by the windows, green and healthy because Jake had been taking care of them. "I kept everything exactly the same," Jake said quietly, watching her face for any sign of recognition. "I thought maybe if nothing changed, it would help you remember." Maya walked slowly through the rooms. The kitchen had coffee mugs sitting by the sink, and she could tell which one was hers by the small chip on the handle. The living room had a soft yellow couch with a throw blanket that looked hand-knitted. Everything was so carefully preserved. like a museum of the life she used to live. In the bedroom, she found clothes in the closet that fit her perfectly, but felt like costumes for a play she had never auditioned for. There was a small jewelry box on the dresser, and when she opened it, soft music played. Inside was a simple silver necklace that Jake said she wore every day before the accident. "You can sleep in the guest room if you want," Jake offered. "I mean, if this feels too weird, I can sleep there instead. Whatever makes you comfortable." That was the thing that made Maya's heart hurt the most. Jake was being so careful, so considerate, treating her like a fragile stranger who happened to look like someone he loved, because that's exactly what she was. As the sun started to set, painting the apartment in warm orange light, Maya stood by the living room window and tried to imagine herself living this life. Cooking in that kitchen, reading on that couch, falling asleep next to Jake in that bed. It should have felt natural, but instead it felt like trying on someone else's shoes. Technically possible, but never quite right. Jake ordered takeout from a place he said was her favorite, and they ate quietly at the small dining table. The food tasted good, but Maya couldn't tell if it tasted familiar. Everything felt like that now. Pleasant but distant, like watching life happen to someone else. Later that evening, as Jake showed her how to work the TV remote and which drawer had the good chocolate, Maya realized something that scared her more than the memory loss itself. Jake was trying so hard to help her remember their old life that neither of them was figuring out how to live their new one. Living with Jake felt like being a guest in her own home. Maya would wake up every morning in the spare bedroom, listening to the sounds of someone else making breakfast in what was supposed to be her kitchen. The smell of coffee would drift under her door, and she'd lie there for a few extra minutes trying to convince herself that today might be different. Today maybe something would click, but it never did. Jake had kept everything exactly the same, hoping it would help her remember. Her books were still organized by color on the living room shelves, all the blues together, then the greens, then the reds. It looked pretty, but Maya couldn't figure out why she would have done something so strange. Who organizes books by color instead of by author or subject? Her art supplies were still set up by the big window in the corner. Paintbrushes clean and ready, tubes of paint squeezed from the bottom just the way Jake said she always did it. There was even a half-finished painting on the easel, a landscape with mountains and a lake that looked peaceful and familiar, even though Maya was sure she'd never seen that place before. The worst part was how hard Jake was trying. He would point to photos on the refrigerator and tell her stories about each one. "This is from your birthday last year. You were so happy because it snowed, and you said it was like the city was throwing you a party." Maya would nod and smile, but inside she felt nothing. The woman in the photo looked happy, sure, but she might as well have been a complete stranger. 3 weeks into living back home, Charlie came back. The golden retriever bounded through the door like a furry tornado, tail wagging so hard his whole body shook. And here's the strange thing. Maya felt something. Not a memory exactly, but a warmth in her chest when Charlie jumped up and licked her face. Her hands seemed to know exactly how to scratch behind his ears, and when she said, "Good boy," it felt natural. "He remembers you," Jake said, and Maya could hear the hope in his voice. "Maybe that means," but Maya shook her head. "I don't remember him, Jake. I like dogs. I think I always liked dogs." She started seeing Dr. Martinez twice a week. The therapist's office had soft lighting and comfortable chairs, and Dr. Martinez had a gentle way of asking hard questions. During their sessions, Maya learned about different types of memory. There was the kind that helped you remember how to ride a bike or brush your teeth. That kind was still there. But the memory that held feelings and experiences and connections to people, that was the kind the accident had taken. "Think of your brain like a library," Dr. Martinez explained. "Some of the books are still there, but others fell off the shelves and got scattered. We're trying to help you put them back in order." Jake came to some of the sessions, and Maya could see how much it hurt him when she couldn't answer simple questions about their life together. When Dr. Martinez asked about their first kiss, Maya looked blank. When she asked about their first fight, Maya shrugged. Jake's face would get tight and he'd stare at his hands. At home, things got more and more awkward. Jake would reach for Maya's hand during movies, then remember and pull back. He'd start to kiss her goodbye in the morning, then catch himself and just pat her shoulder instead. Maya felt terrible about it, but she also felt relieved. Being touched by someone who felt like a stranger made her skin crawl, even though she knew that wasn't fair to Jake. One evening, Jake made dinner. Spaghetti with a sauce he said was her grandmother's recipe. He'd written down the recipe from memory because Maya used to make it all the time. The smell filled the apartment, rich and garlicky and warm. Maya took a bite and waited for some spark of recognition, some flood of childhood memories. Nothing came. "It's good," she said, because it was. But Jake's face fell anyway. "You used to say it tasted like home," he said quietly. That night, Maya lay in bed staring at the ceiling and thinking about the word home. What did home even mean when you couldn't remember the experiences that made a place feel safe and familiar? Was home just four walls and some furniture? Or was it something deeper? Something that lived in your heart and your memories? She could hear Jake in the next room, probably lying awake too. Sometimes she heard him talking on the phone to his sister or his friends, his voice low and worried. Once she heard him cry and it made her stomach hurt in a way she couldn't explain. The breaking point came on a Tuesday morning. Maya was looking through the kitchen drawers trying to find a can opener, when she opened one that was full of takeout menus, dozens of them, from restaurants all over the city. Each one had little notes written in her handwriting. "Jake loves the orange chicken," or "order extra rice," or "don't get the fish here again." For some reason, seeing those little notes made everything feel worse instead of better. They were proof of a life lived together, small daily decisions made as a couple. But to Maya, they might as well have been written by someone else entirely. She sat down at the kitchen table and started crying. Not gentle tears, but big, ugly sobs that came from somewhere deep in her chest. When Jake found her there, surrounded by takeout menus, he knelt down beside her chair. "I can't do this anymore," Maya said through her tears. "I can't keep pretending to be someone I don't remember being. It's not fair to you, and it's not fair to me." Jake was quiet for a long time, just rubbing her back in small circles. Finally, he said, "What do you want to do?" Maya wiped her eyes and looked at him. Really looked at him. He had kind eyes and a face that had probably been handsome before worry carved lines around his mouth. He deserved someone who could love him back the way he loved her. He deserved someone who lit up when he walked in the room, not someone who had to remind herself to smile. "I think I need to figure out who I am now," Maya said. "Not who I used to be. Who I am right now, today." Jake nodded slowly, like he'd been expecting this conversation for weeks. "Okay," he said. "How do we do that?" But Maya didn't have an answer. All she knew was that trying to squeeze herself back into her old life felt like trying to wear clothes that didn't fit anymore. Something had to change, even if it meant everything would get more complicated before it got better. 2 months later, Maya stood in front of the Riverside Art Gallery, holding a cup of coffee and trying to calm her nerves. Getting this job had felt like the first real step toward building a new life instead of trying to reconstruct an old one. Jake had helped her put together a portfolio of her paintings. Apparently, she'd always been good at art, and somehow she'd convinced the gallery owner to give her a chance. The gallery was small but bright, with white walls and big windows that let in lots of natural light. Maya loved it immediately. Here she could be just Maya, the new assistant. Not Maya who used to be someone else, not Maya who couldn't remember her own life. Just Maya. Her boss, Helen, was a woman in her 60s with gray hair and paint-stained fingers who treated Maya like any other employee. No careful looks, no walking on eggshells, no stories about who she used to be. It was the most normal Maya had felt in months. "Your job is simple," Helen explained on Maya's first day. "Help customers, keep track of sales, and don't let anyone touch the paintings with dirty hands." "Think you can handle that?" Maya smiled. "I think I can manage." The work was easy and peaceful. Maya spent her days surrounded by beautiful art, talking to people who loved creativity as much as she did. She learned about different painting techniques and art movements, and some of it felt familiar, while other parts felt completely new. It was like discovering pieces of herself that had been hidden, not lost. That's when she met Ryan. Ryan was a photographer who came to the gallery to discuss showing his work. He had dark hair that was always a little messy, like he'd been running his fingers through it, and he wore old jeans with a camera bag slung across his shoulder. When he smiled, his whole face lit up, and when he laughed, it was loud and genuine. Most importantly, Ryan knew nothing about Maya's accident or her missing memories. To him, she was just the interesting woman who worked at the gallery and seemed to really understand art. He didn't look at her with pity or hope or careful concern. He just looked at her like she was a person worth getting to know. Their first conversation happened on a rainy Thursday afternoon, when the gallery was empty except for them. Ryan was studying a series of abstract paintings, tilting his head this way and that. "What do you think?" Maya asked, walking over to stand beside him. "I think the artist was either very happy or very confused when they painted these," Ryan said, grinning. "Maybe both." Maya laughed, actually laughed onward for the first time in months. "That's probably the most honest art critique I've ever heard." They started talking about art, then about the city, then about a dozen other things. Ryan told her about growing up in Portland, about learning photography from his grandfather, about his dream of having his own show someday. Maya found herself telling him about painting, about how colors seemed to have feelings, about how she loved the way light changed throughout the day. She didn't mention the accident. She didn't mention Jake. For one perfect afternoon, she was just Maya talking to Ryan, and nothing else mattered. After that, Ryan started showing up at the gallery more often. Sometimes he brought coffee. Sometimes he brought pictures he'd taken around the city. Sometimes he just came to chat during Maya's lunch break. Helen noticed and started giving Maya knowing looks, but she didn't say anything. Maya found herself looking forward to Ryan's visits. He made her feel light and free, like she could be anyone she wanted to be. When he asked questions about her life, she could answer honestly because he was asking about who she was now, not who she used to be. The problem was Jake. Maya was still living in their apartment, still sleeping in the guest room, still pretending to try to remember their life together. But now she had somewhere else to be, someone else to think about. She started staying late at the gallery, helping Helen with inventory or just organizing things that didn't really need organizing. Jake noticed the change immediately. Maya seemed happier, more energetic. She hummed while making breakfast and actually smiled when she watched TV. At first he was thrilled, thinking maybe she was finally starting to feel at home again. Then he saw the text messages. Maya had left her phone on the kitchen counter while she showered, and when it buzzed, Jake glanced at it automatically. The message was from someone named Ryan. "Had fun talking today. Want to grab dinner this weekend?" Jake's stomach dropped. He stood there staring at the phone, feeling like the ground was shifting under his feet. Maya had been getting better, but not because of him. Because of someone else, someone who didn't have to carry the weight of 5 years of forgotten love. When Maya came out of the bathroom, Jake was sitting at the kitchen table with her phone in his hands. "Who's Ryan?" he asked quietly. Maya's face went pale, then red. He works with the gallery. We're friends." "Friends who grab dinner together?" Maya sat down across from him, and Jake could see her trying to figure out what to say. Finally, she said, "Jake, I can't keep living like this. I can't keep trying to be someone I don't remember being." "So you're just going to be someone else instead?" The hurt in his voice made Maya's chest ache. She reached across the table, but Jake pulled his hands away. "It's not like that," Maya said. "Ryan doesn't expect me to be anyone except who I am right now. Do you know how good that feels? To just be myself without constantly disappointing someone?" "You don't disappoint me," Jake said, but his voice was weak. "Yes, I do. Every day. Every time you show me a picture and I don't remember. Every time you tell me a story about us and I just nod and pretend it means something to me. Every time you look at me like I'm supposed to love you back and I just can't." They sat in silence for a long time. Outside their window, the city hummed with life, people going to work, coming home, living their uncomplicated lives. Maya envied them. "I've been thinking about getting my own place," Maya said finally. Jake's head snapped up. "Maya, please. Don't give up on us. I know it's hard, but maybe if we just give it more time." "How much time, Jake? How long are we supposed to pretend this is working? You're not happy and I'm not happy. We're just stuck." That weekend, Maya did have dinner with Ryan. Not because she was trying to hurt Jake, but because for 2 hours she could sit across from someone and just be herself. Ryan made her laugh until her sides hurt. He listened when she talked about her art. He didn't know she was broken, so he didn't treat her like she needed to be fixed. When Ryan walked her to her car that night, he kissed her. Just a soft, gentle kiss that felt like a question rather than a demand. And for the first time since the accident, Maya felt something real and immediate and completely her own. But driving home, all she could think about was Jake sitting alone in their apartment, probably waiting up for her, probably hoping she'd walk through the door with some miracle memory that would make everything okay again. Maya sat in her car outside the apartment building for 20 minutes, trying to figure out what to do. She cared about Jake, how could she not? He'd been nothing but kind and patient and loving. But caring about someone wasn't the same as being in love with them. And Maya was starting to think that maybe, just maybe, she deserved to find out what being in love actually felt like, instead of trying to remember what it used to feel like. Maya's new apartment was small, but it was hers. One bedroom, a tiny kitchen, and windows that faced east so she could watch the sunrise. Ryan had helped her move in, carrying boxes and making jokes about how many art supplies one person could possibly need. For the first time in months, Maya felt like she could breathe. Living with Ryan felt easy in a way that living with Jake never had. There were no photo albums to look through, no stories about a past she couldn't remember, no careful silences when she didn't react the right way to something. Ryan cooked terrible pasta and left his socks on the floor and sang off-key in the shower. And Maya loved all of it because it was real and happening right now. Charlie stayed with Jake, which broke Maya's heart a little. But it seemed cruel to take away the one thing that still remembered their old life together. When she went to pick up the rest of her things, Jake looked like he'd aged 10 years in the 2 weeks since she'd moved out. "You look happy," he said, and Maya could hear him trying to keep the sadness out of his voice. "I am," she said gently. "I hope you can be happy too. Jake, you deserve that." He nodded and helped her load the last box into Ryan's car, and when she drove away, Maya tried not to look in the mirror at Jake standing alone on the sidewalk. Maya threw herself into her work at the gallery. Helen had been talking about putting together a show featuring local artists, and Maya volunteered to help organize it. She spent her days looking at portfolios, visiting studios, and talking to artists about their work. It felt meaningful in a way that trying to remember the past never had. That's when the breakthrough happened. Maya was in her apartment one evening, working on a new painting. She'd been experimenting with different styles, trying to figure out what kind of artist she was now. The canvas in front of her was covered in blues and greens swirling together like water. She wasn't sure what she was painting exactly. Her hands seemed to be moving on their own, following some instinct she didn't understand. Ryan was in the kitchen making dinner, and the smell of garlic and herbs filled the apartment. Maya added a splash of gold to her painting, then stepped back to look at it. Something about the colors made her feel strange. Not bad strange, but like she was on the edge of remembering something important. "That's beautiful," Ryan said, coming up behind her with 2 glasses of wine. "What is it?" Maya stared at the painting. "I don't know. I kept thinking about light underwater, like when you're swimming and you look up at the surface." "Have you been swimming recently?" "No," Maya said slowly. "I don't think I even like swimming." But as she said it, she wasn't sure that was true. The painting showed deep blue water with golden light filtering down from above, and looking at it made her feel peaceful and sad at the same time. Why would she paint something that made her feel sad? 2 weeks later, the gallery show was opening night. Maya had worked for a month to put it together, and she was proud of how it turned out. Local artists filled the white walls with their creations: photographs, paintings, sculptures, even some digital art that changed colors when you walked past it. Maya wore a black dress that Ryan said made her look like a real art curator, and she felt confident and professional as people started arriving. Helen introduced her to collectors and other gallery owners, and Maya found herself talking easily about the artwork and the artists who'd made it. She was explaining a sculpture to a potential buyer when she saw him. Jake stood near the entrance, looking uncomfortable in a suit and tie, holding a small bouquet of flowers. Their eyes met across the room, and Maya's stomach did a little flip. She excused herself and walked over to him. "Jake, what are you doing here?" "I heard about the show from Helen," he said. "I wanted to see what you'd been working on, and to give you these." He held out the flowers, daisies, simple and cheerful. "I know you probably don't remember, but daisies were always your favorite." Maya took the flowers, and for just a second something flickered in her mind. A feeling of sitting in a field somewhere, making chains out of flowers, but then it was gone. "Thank you," she said. "Do you want me to show you around?" They walked through the gallery together, and Maya found herself chattering nervously about each piece. Jake listened carefully, asking good questions and seeming genuinely interested in the work. It reminded Maya why she'd liked him when they first met in the hospital. He was kind and thoughtful, and really listened when people talked. They stopped in front of a series of paintings by a local artist named Tom Chen. The painting showed Different lakes and rivers around Northern California, all painted in rich blues and greens with light reflecting off the water. "These are gorgeous," Jake said, then stopped suddenly. His face went pale as he stared at one painting in particular. It showed a mountain lake with pine trees around the edges and golden light streaming across the water. "Maya," he said quietly, "look at this painting. Really look at it." Maya looked and her heart started beating faster. The painting looked almost exactly like the one she'd been working on in her apartment. The same blues and greens, the same golden light, even the same feeling of looking up from underwater. "I don't understand," Maya said. Jake pulled out his phone and started scrolling through photos. "Here," he said, showing her the screen. "This is from our trip to Lake Tahoe 2 years ago. You spent the whole weekend painting sketches of the lake. You said you wanted to do a whole series about light and water." The photo showed Maya, the old Maya, sitting by a lake with a sketchbook in her lap. Behind her was the exact same view as the painting on the gallery wall. Pine trees, mountain peaks, golden light dancing on blue water. Maya stared at the photo, then at the painting, then at her own hands. "But I painted something just like this last week, at home." "I've never been to Lake Tahoe, haven't you?" Jake asked softly. Maya's mind was racing. She thought about all the times her hands had seemed to know things her brain didn't. The way she automatically organized her brushes, the way she mixed colors without thinking, the way she'd painted that underwater scene even though she didn't remember ever seeing anything like it. "I need some air," Maya said, and practically ran toward the gallery's back door. Outside in the alley, Maya leaned against the brick wall and tried to make sense of what had just happened. Ryan found her there a few minutes later, looking worried. "Hey, what's wrong? Someone said you ran out here like the building was on fire." Maya told him about the painting and Jake's photo. Ryan listened without interrupting, but she could see him getting more and more uncomfortable. "So what does that mean?" Ryan asked when she finished. "I don't know," Maya said honestly. "Maybe some part of me has been remembering all along. Maybe my hands remember things my brain doesn't." Ryan was quiet for a long time. Finally, he said, "Maya, can I ask you something? Do you think you're happy with me because you actually care about me? Or because I'm not him?" The question hit Maya like a slap. She opened her mouth to say of course she cared about him. But the words wouldn't come. Because the truth was, she didn't know. How could she tell the difference between genuine feelings and the relief of not having to try to remember? "I don't know," she whispered. Ryan nodded like he'd been expecting that answer. "I think you need to figure that out before we go any further." That night, Maya lay in bed staring at the ceiling while Ryan slept beside her. In her mind, she kept seeing that painting and Jake's photo and her own hands moving across a canvas, painting memories she didn't know she had. For the first time since the accident, Maya wondered if maybe she'd been running away from the wrong thing. The revelation about the painting kept Maya awake for 3 nights straight. She'd sit in front of her easel, staring at the underwater scene she'd painted, trying to understand how her hands could remember something her mind had forgotten. Every brushstroke looked familiar now, like she was reading a letter she'd written to herself. On the 4th morning, Maya made a decision that surprised even her. She called Dr. Martinez and asked for an emergency appointment. "I think I've been fighting the wrong battle," Maya told the therapist, settling into the familiar chair. "I've been so focused on moving forward that I never really tried to look back." Dr. Martinez leaned forward, interested. "What changed your mind?" Maya told her about the painting, about Jake's photo, about the way her hands seemed to know things her brain didn't. As she talked, she realized something that made her stomach twist with guilt. "I think I left Jake because it was easier than doing the hard work of trying to remember," Maya said. "And I think I started dating Ryan because he doesn't require me to be anyone except who I am right now." "But that's not fair to anyone, is it?" Dr. Martinez was quiet for a moment. "What do you think would be fair?" "I don't know," Maya admitted. "But I think I need to find out if there's more of my old self still in here somewhere. Not for Jake, not for Ryan, but for me." That afternoon, Maya did something she hadn't done since moving out. She called Jake. "Can we meet somewhere?" she asked. "I need to talk to you about something." They met at Ocean Beach, the same place Jake said they used to watch sunsets together. Maya couldn't remember those sunsets, but sitting on the sand with the waves crashing nearby felt peaceful in a way she couldn't explain. "I broke up with Ryan," Maya said without preamble. Jake's eyebrows shot up. "Why?" "Because I realized I was using him to avoid dealing with my real feelings. That's not fair to him, and it's not fair to me either. Maya picked up a handful of sand and let it run through her fingers. Jake, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest. Okay. If I never remember our life together, if I never remember loving you the way I used to, would that be enough? Could you love someone who has to choose to love you back instead of just feeling it naturally? Jake was quiet for so long that Maya started to think he wasn't going to answer. Finally, he said, Do you know what I've learned in the past few months? Love isn't just a feeling. It's a choice you make every single day. I chose to love you when you were unconscious in the hospital. I chose to love you when you couldn't remember my name. I chose to love you even when you moved out. But what about you? Maya asked. Don't you deserve someone who can love you back without having to work so hard at it? Jake smiled for the first time since Maya had seen him at the gallery. Maya, do you think love is ever easy? Do you think any couple just feels happy and connected all the time without having to work at it? Maya had never thought about it that way. She'd been so focused on the love she couldn't remember that she'd never considered what love actually looked like day to day. Can I tell you something? Jake continued. The woman I fell in love with 5 years ago was stubborn and independent and always trying to figure things out for herself. The woman sitting next to me right now is stubborn and independent and trying to figure things out for herself. Maybe you're not as different as you think you are. That evening, Maya went back to her apartment and did something she'd been avoiding for months. She dug out all the photo albums Jake had shown her in the hospital and really looked at them, not trying to remember but trying to understand who she used to be. The photos told the story of a woman who laughed a lot, who got paint on her clothes, who made silly faces at the camera. A woman who looked at Jake like he hung the moon, who held his hand like she never wanted to let go. Maya studied her own face in those pictures, looking for clues about who she'd been. In one photo, she was standing in front of a half-finished painting, wearing Jake's shirt and holding a coffee mug. Her hair was messy and there was paint in it, but she looked completely happy. Maya stared at that photo for a long time, trying to imagine feeling that comfortable and content. Over the next few weeks, Maya started a new kind of therapy with Dr. Martinez. Instead of trying to force memories to return, they worked on understanding who Maya was now and how that person might choose to build a future. Maya painted more, and each painting seemed to unlock something small. Not memories exactly, but feelings and instincts she'd thought were gone forever. She painted the view from Jake's apartment window and realized she'd always loved how the morning light hit the buildings across the street. She painted Charlie and remembered not the specific day they'd adopted him, but the feeling of knowing instantly that he belonged with them. She painted Jake's hands and understood why she used to love watching him cook, the careful way he measured ingredients and tasted everything twice. These weren't memories in the traditional sense. They were more like echoes, pieces of her old self that had been sleeping rather than lost. 1 month later, Maya stood outside Jake's apartment building, holding a small canvas and trying to work up the courage to ring the doorbell. She'd painted something new, not a landscape or a portrait, but something abstract. Blues and gold swirling together, but this time they looked less like underwater light and more like two people learning to dance together. Jake answered the door in his pajamas, clearly having just woken up from a nap. His hair was sticking up and he had pillow marks on his cheek, and Maya felt something flutter in her chest that she hadn't felt since the accident. Not a memory, but something new and warm and entirely her own. Hi, she said. Hi yourself. What's that? Jake nodded at the painting in her hands. It's us, Maya said. Not us the way we were, but us the way we could be. If you want to try. Jake looked at the painting, then at Maya, then back at the painting. What are you saying? Maya took a deep breath. The next words were some of the hardest she'd ever said, but also some of the most important. Love me again, she said, stepping closer. Not the person I used to be, but the person I am right now. And let me try to love you back. Not because I remember loving you before, but because I'm choosing to love you now. Jake's eyes filled with tears. Prove you remember me, he said softly, echoing her words back to her. Maya smiled. I can't prove I remember you, but I can prove I want to know you. I can prove I want to build something new with you, something that belongs to both of us. Jake stepped aside to let her into the apartment, their apartment, and Maya walked in carrying her painting and her hopes and her choice to try again. Charlie bounded over to greet her, tail wagging, and Maya knelt down to scratch his ears while Jake watched from the doorway. So what happens now? Jake asked. Maya stood up and looked around the apartment that used to feel like a museum of someone else's life. Now it just looked like a place where two people could learn to be happy together. Now we start over, Maya said, but this time we do it together. 6 months later, Maya hung her new painting in their living room right next to the half-finished landscape she'd been working on before the accident. The old painting showed a mountain lake with golden light, a memory from a life she couldn't quite recall. The new painting showed something harder to define but just as beautiful. Two people choosing each other, every single day, even when it wasn't easy. Maya couldn't remember loving Jake, but she was learning to love him. And maybe, she thought as she watched him make coffee in their kitchen while Charlie begged for treats, maybe choosing love was even better than just feeling it.